Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about criticism. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how do you prepare your mind to hear continuous critical feedback? Well, if it's code related, I usually I have a sheet that I've learned how to detach myself from the code that I write. In the beginning, it was very difficult to do so. And the other type of criticism that I'm still struggling a little bit with is personality related things, and I'll touch on both. So for code related things, as I said, I have a sheet, and that is that I've been working as a software developer for long enough now that I can, I'm not going to be the world's best coder ever, but I know how to produce software at the levels that you would find software being developed at, like larger companies and things like that. So I don't really have usually a lot of cause for anxiety for the code that I write, unless it's like an interview or something like that, because mind goes and you start thinking about, oh shit, they're gonna look at all of these things, and you sort of forget, because I've done so many interviews now that I kind of go, why I should think, why am I worried? I know how all the companies I've hired for, I know what the candidates look like in terms of like how their form is and what they're doing, and you're no worse than that. So why are you scared? Well, because hey, performance anxieties and so forth. But the trick is basically down to that you have to understand what I argue, at the very least. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that, but the imposter syndrome phenomenon is usually the thing that is the biggest problem for people when it comes to code-related criticism. So if you get critical feedback on your code, like someone doesn't like it or so forth, it's usually something that someone with imposter syndrome takes very personally. And the thing I'm trying to tell you is that you have to be able to detach your sense of worth from the code that you have written. This is very difficult if you don't actually believe that you are good at what you do. That's where the problem lies usually. So, as I was saying, for me, that was very difficult in the beginning when I was a junior, because as any junior, you don't really know how good you are. You don't really know. You haven't done anything, so you have no history with this thing, right? And so the thing that I did was very simply that I practiced and practiced and worked and worked and worked and worked until I was less anxious about it, because I've done things so many times that I quote unquote know the right way of doing something. These days I know more than one way of doing a lot of stuff. And so the confidence that comes with the fact that you know that you're good at your craft is the thing that will prepare you for being criticized, because you're not usually scared if someone is gonna not like your code or so forth when you really know what you're doing, because usually the feedback you get is like a different way of doing something you already know, or they don't like a specific thing you did that is like these tiny little details usually that you can just change. You're not so emotionally attached to it. But when you're a junior or like an imposter syndrome type of person, you don't have confidence in your own work. It's sort of, as I like to say, it's like an overweight person being very sensitive about their weight. The reason they are sensitive is because they are very aware of that they are overweight. And so anything that reminds them of that fact is a big no-no. And they're sort of, in my opinion at the very least, it's sort of the same deal here. You're sort of, you're not addressing the root issue. You're trying to avoid having to deal with it. And the thing that you, as a overweight person, need to do is to lose the weight, or like to get into shape. As is the same thing with software developers. If you feel like you are not good enough, then practice until you are good enough, because you're going to be able to be good enough. It's just a matter of, do you want to make that investment right? The other part that I'm pretty shit at is personal feedback, things where people don't like my attitude or my way of behaving or something like that, which is a common theme. It's, as I said, it's not. I have had feedback, of course, on my coding as well as anybody, but I feel fairly stable there. This is the thing that usually gets me, because I have a track record of causing issues with certain types of people. And that basically creates a lot of anxiety. I've had a few really bad situations in my career so far where it's been very punishing for me to try to work towards being, either improving code or trying to do my best or pushing it and trying to be the best that I can be, and so forth and so forth. Because the reality is that you will always clash with someone. If you try to rock a boat, someone's not gonna like you for it. And I have had real issues with this, and I still have real issues with whenever it's almost like PST, post-traumatic stress syndrome or something. If someone taps me on the shoulder and says, "I have some feedback for you," that's like my biggest trigger. I have some feedback for you, Frederick. When you say that, when my manager says this, I immediately go, "Oh shit, what have I done now?" Because nobody ever gave feedback like that, or nobody ever said that when everything was great, right? And the fundamental problem that I have, or the only tip I can give you, is that there is a certain type of person, and I'm just not that person, who can go, "I don't give a fuck what you think." I can do that for certain situations, for certain for certain people, or some people that I don't really care about and so forth. Absolutely, but not on average. Not when it's people that I care about, or where because I'm one of those people I want to do a good job even when I don't have to, because it's important to me to do the best that I can in every situation. And to me, having some whatever I'm doing turn out really poorly is not something that I really like. And especially when it comes back as, negative feedback or things like that, right? So I'm sensitive to it. But the thing I've realized is that I'm just not that sort of person who can just have, say, coworkers or so forth not like me. So what I've found to be more efficient than that is to sort of just accept the fact that I will not be able to work with everybody. I will not be able to make everybody happy. And it's that simple. Because the reality is that usually the people that I clash with are people that I don't really want to compromise on the topics that we clash over. Because usually when I have had these sorts of feedback sessions, because they don't like my tone or like the way that I behave or so forth. And that's usually related to that I have an issue with the overall performance of a team or a practice or a process. I basically question people. People hate being questioned. And so when you do that and people feel like you're like you're basically questioning everything they do. The fundamental problem is that I can either ignore what I see as an issue and just be quiet, and that can absolutely work. I'm working on that as well. Or I can say something. And the problem is to find that sweet spot. And I've found that I have a hard time letting things that are not going so well just lie. So in my world, it's always been the case that I've tried to comply, and then the bitterness sort of gets me, and sort of I start feeling resentful, and it builds up. And I figured out that instead of letting that resentment build up, I should simply admit to myself that this is an environment where they want to do things in a certain way. I don't agree with the way they want to do things. I should move if I can't change the environment, because I won't let this thing that is causing me all this anxiety and this resentment build up to the point where I'm going to have a bunch of feedback meetings over the fact that I didn't agree with something or I used the wrong tone and so forth. Because by today's standards, guys, you should know that it's very common that questioning people, even if you mean well, is a big no-no. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that you prepare yourself for critical feedback, if it's coding or craft related, I suggest that you get to a point where you feel pretty good about your own software skills. It's usually very easy to deal with criticisms or feedback or so forth, especially the more advanced things get. At my level, for example, I get questioned on different architectural decisions all the way down to the coding that I do and so forth. And in some cases, you have to sort of admit that you may not know exactly how to do something, and then be humble enough to, as I said, detach yourself from the code and say, I'm thinking we're going to go do this thing. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to work or not, but I have a good feeling about it, and be humble enough to sort of say, all right, it could turn to shit, but I'm at least admitting that it could turn to shit, so hopefully that mitigates the problem. Because when you can detach yourself from the code, it becomes easier for you to deal with criticism. The other thing that is worth thinking about is personal issues, like people don't like your attitude, or they don't like that you question them, or they don't like that you get frustrated over things and so forth and so forth. This is one of probably my biggest problem, because the reality is that, as I like to tell people, the worst thing you can fuck up 100 times with around me, like if I would like forgive everything and so forth, but something that I cannot handle very well is that when I see systematic problems where you're literally, you have someone who is either incompetent, or you have some result that you need to meet, and you can't fulfill it. And it's not because it can't be done, it is because the people who are dealing with this issue are not capable of solving it for reasons. It doesn't have to be competence, it can be all kinds of things. And when you feel like you have no way of fixing the problem, that's when my resentment starts bubbling up. And I usually am the sort of person who will say, I think that's a good idea, I don't think that's a good idea. That's very dangerous to have that personality depending on the circumstances, because people will basically start complaining. And so my suggestion to you is that if you're the sort of person who can deal with the fact that people just don't like you, or like your manager, like you get a tap on the shoulder and you get a feedback session, if you can deal with that and sort of say, yeah, you go fuck yourself type of style, and like you just shrug it off, go for it. My approach has usually been that I've just realized that instead of building up this frustration, I'll just say, all right, if this is the way that it has to work, then I will just either shut my mouth, or I'll go and work with people that are more like-minded to myself, because that usually works out better for me at the very least. Have a great day.